This is going to be a fun ride because it's a talk which I have never given before. It's a topic which was brought to my attention by Arthur, and I listened to the presentation he made a couple of weeks ago on Zoom, which was very detailed, like a great professor he is at Hofstra. And so my talk about this hope will be just sharing with you some key points from my life story. And in spite of the ups and downs, here I am, being invited to this place, which in itself is a great honor. So good morning to all of you, both here as well as some of the faces I recognize who have signed in remotely. And thank you for welcoming me here today. It's an honor to speak with a community that places such deep value on ethical reflection, human dignity, and a pursuit of a better world. And no applause. We gather at a time when turmoil feels ever present. The wars are raging all over, injustices persist, and the planet groans under the weight of our collective choices. And yet we are here. We choose to gather, to think, to feel, and to act. That choice in itself is a quiet act of hope. We are doing something about it. I have been blessed in more ways than I can count. I got married to the valedictorian of my class. And she's sitting right here, and she's very good with this cell business, which I've been blessed with a very devoted family, faith, profession, engagement in community activities, research, and establishing major institutions here on Long Island. You heard about one of them, and overseas. It's been a great journey, and for today's brief presentation, I will share some personal stories which may address some of these topics. As I mentioned, I will dispense with the definition of hope, since Arthur has already elucidated that in a previous presentation. Let me start with my birthplace. I was born in Kashmir. Any of you been to Kashmir? It's described as the Switzerland of Asia. Beautiful lakes, mountains, Himalayas in the background, and referred to as Switzerland of Asia. Sadly, the partition of the Indian subcontinent in 1947 into India and Pakistan led to the partition of the state of Kashmir. Prolonged conflict, heavy armed Indian presence, and many UN resolutions. My childhood was in this conflict zone, which obviously had an effect on our family. And as a 4-year-old kid, I remember in the late 40s, my mom, who was always depressed and crying. So what was afflicting her? Her firstborn, my oldest brother, Rashid Khan, he was returning from his education in UK, and he was stranded in what is then Pakistan. And he wasn't allowed to enter Kashmir. That was 1947. And the distance between where he was and where we were is about the distance from here to Montauk. So for 8 years, he was not allowed to come back home. And that can imagine the impact of that on our family. And it's just a small story, and which really impacted mostly my mom. He was allowed to return to Kashmir 8 years later in 1955. Now let's fast forward to 2025, 70 plus years later. We have a new term in Kashmir, half widows. Anybody hear about that? Ever heard of that? Well, the half widows are women, moms, who have lost husbands without knowing the fate of over 2,300 young men. When you have time, Google it, go to YouTube, there's a whole documentary on it. On the 10th of each month, many half-widows gather in a park in Kashmir with pictures and placards of the missing men. When asked why they do this every month for over 20 years, The answer is we want a closure about our loved ones. Which unmarked grave is my husband, my brother, and my son? So they have eternal hope. And as I mentioned, there's a documentary titled Half Widows, which describes it in detail. Here locally, September 7th, Newsday reported on the experience of families who met at missing persons event in Brentwood Fire Department. The headline of the write-up was, "All we have right now is hope." So you lose someone, you don't know what happened to them, and you wonder. And so you have hope, you'll be reinvited. I have many similar stories about Bosnia, what happened in Bosnia, and so on. So global conflicts displace millions and fracture communities. I've shared a sample from Kashmir with you, and you take your pick, turn on the TV, and you'll find places where there are conflicts with lots of impact on the communities. Economic inequality leaves many behind, even in prosperous nations. I will share with you my experience after a visit to Mexico, how that impacts our life in Long Island. Climate change threatens the very fabric of life. Kashmir in 2014 was flooded, inundated, destroyed. And of course, we see our catastrophes here. And of course, social divisions, racial, political, ideological, erode trust and empathy. I was part of a Holy Land delegation, and that's when I was introduced to the term Hamas. I'll give more details about it in my subsequent elaboration. And what triggered me into going into interfaith activities? I was a doctor doing my work, and what's all this interfaith? And it was a very interesting incident in Amman, Jordan, when Professor Arthur Dobrin, when Roger Bone, may he rest in peace, was the dean of a medical school, and I were visiting Jordan Medical School to give some professional lectures, and he asked me, Faroque, after he sees all these people in different garbs and floating around in a hotel in Amman, do you guys believe in Prophet Jesus? And here was the dean of a medical school in the United States, the highest level of education he could have achieved. He didn't have a clue about my faith. And here we were establishing the Islamic Center of Long Island, trying to introduce ourselves. So I took upon myself the challenge, doing what I could to bring the reality of my faith to the larger community. That was the seed for the interfaith activity of my life. Let's now move forward. Professionally, I was in charge of a respiratory ICU in Queens General Hospital in the 70s when I finished my training. And of course, in the respiratory ICU, we see very sick patients. People are on tubes, people are getting all kinds of advanced care. And a question was asked of me, how do you define death? Isn't this person dead? He can't breathe for himself, you have him on tubes, you have this and that. So I was puzzled, I didn't know how to answer this question. And this was a Muslim patient who asked me this question, how do you define death? So this brings me to how do I approach when I'm asked to answer a complicated question, although death is not a complicated question. And let me surprise you, there are 7 different definitions of death medically. And so what do? I do a little research. I asked my dad, who's a scholar, I asked this, and they tell me, look in the Quran, it's there. And so I look in the Quran, what does it say? Separation of soul and body. So now how do I transfer that at Newmake or Queens General Hospital and figure out, has the soul left the body? Where does the soul rest? Is it in the brain? Is it in the heart? Where is it? How do you define it? And then so logically it led me to basically doing some deeper research and figuring out that any complicated question like that, Quran is the first reference, which is our book of reference for Islam. Then what the Prophet did or did not do is the Hadith, which is the second reference. If you don't get an answer there, then you get a group of people together, which is called the Ijma, consultation, and issue a decision, not a decision, but a recommendation. And then finally, if you don't get an answer, you decide. You figure out to the best of your knowledge. So there are 4 steps. So the Quran says the separation of the soul from the body. In the Hadith traditions, which I read about Prophet Muhammad's life, I didn't find any clear definition. So we get a group of people together. I talk to Ijma, I talk to the scholars, I talk to our Imam, and they give me the same answers: separation of soul and body. So does the soul rest here? Does the soul rest here? So as a critical physician, I ended up writing a paper, which we called Definition of Death, Islamic Perspective. And I concluded, and some people didn't agree, that if the brain is gone, it's time to disconnect everything and declare the patient dead. And that led me to Doha, Qatar, believe it or not. Doha is in the news these days. Qatar is in the news. I was invited to present this paper I had written in a conference of Middle East scholars, physicians, and I presented that. It was accepted, converted into, translated into Arabic and distributed in the Middle East. Because this was the first time they got a clear definition from a practicing Muslim about the real definition of death. So brain death is an accepted mode of death in Islam. So I just share this as to how to answer a question which is technically difficult. Now, coming here was a no-brainer. I called up Arthur. How do I get there? I didn't have to consult the book. I didn't have to go here or there. So the complicated questions, that is what I follow. The Quran also says in second chapter, verse 155 to 157, and according to us, our belief, Quran is the word of God revealed to a man by the name of Prophet Muhammad through angel Gabriel. So we believe it's God's word. And it says, God will certainly send you trials of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, people, and crops. So give good news to the people who are steadfast and who say when a disaster strikes, we belong to God and to him we will return. So I don't think anybody in this room hasn't had a down day or hasn't had challenges in life, but God assures us that if you're patient, persevere, you will come out of it. So that's the Quranic guideline. One verse I shared with you, and the second verse I'll come back to in a few minutes. Fast forward to NUMIC, Nassau County Medical Center. In January '87, I was appointed after a very hefty search as the chairman of medicine. And so I joined as chair in the Department of Medicine, big department, but on life support. The agencies, different parts of the agencies had come in, and it was just teetering on getting no accreditation. Why? Because the American Board of Medicine pass rate of our trainees was 33% for a number of years, which was not acceptable. And there was no research. It was basically kind of a community center with no teaching activities. In the 12 years I served as chair of medicine, we increased the American Board of Pass rate from 33% to 95%, one of the top in the country. We were leading research center for, any of you received the medicine ciprofloxacin? Anybody ever received for lung or urinary infection? We were the research center for that at Nassau County Medical Center. That research generated over $1 million. Our house staff were the leading winners of American College of Physicians research contests. And so it was a surprise when I was informed that my contract would not be renewed. And nobody gave me an explanation. There was some speculations. Maybe my increasing profile in the community as a Muslim activist had something to do with this decision-making. I can't say for sure. However, this brings us to the second verse I'm sharing with you from the Quran. Chapter 94 states, "For indeed with hardship there will be ease." This chapter was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad when he was at a very low point. He was being, when you cut off all business dealings with people, he was beaten up, he was in the dumps. ostracized. Thank you. And he was reassured, and there are 5 little sentences there. He was assured that with every hardship there is ease. So hang in there, ease will follow. So what happened to me after I lost my job? I'd worked very hard at it. Something very interesting. I got a call from Saudi Arabia. We'd like you to come and consult the king who's ailing. And this was June 2005. You know how hot Saudi Arabia is. June. And you know what happened in history if the kings got medical advice and it didn't work out too well. So I said, I was skeptical. But the valedictorian pushed me. She said, how many people get to treat a king? Go jump at it. And I flew over, stayed there for a week. And what was interesting, I was approached by Dr. Abdullah Al-Amru, who was a newly appointed CEO of a major medical institution there, King Fahd Medical City, a 1,000-bed hospital with a medical school with 3 different hospitals in it. And he said, look, we have the money, we have the resources, but we need experience. We need experienced people. You have to come. So after some hesitation here and there, I signed a 1-year contract. Every time I would go to Abdullah, it's time to go home. He says, that's not an option. So I stayed for 6 years. Now, what did I do there? I established the research center for that major mega institution. And which I'm really proud of, I was able to arrange the training of about 100 nurses from my hometown, Kashmir, in that hospital. They got 3 months of experience and rubbed shoulders with top-notch nurses from all over the world. And then I helped establish the first chapter for the American College of Physicians in that part of the world, which is thriving. So, in retrospect, my termination from Nassau County Medical Center opened up so many new doors that in retrospect, I consider them as one of the highlights of my life. Now, how did we get into, before Arthur pulls me off the podium, I gotta get moving. We were in Amman, Jordan, as visiting professors in the university there. And as we were sitting in the hotel there during a break, Roger turned around and asked me, do you guys really believe, what's your status about Prophet Jesus, he asked. And of course, it was an easy answer. There's a whole chapter in the Quran about the mother of Jesus, Mary. And we believe in virgin birth of Mary based on Quranic teachings. And so it was an easy answer for me, but it brought up a lot of other questions. I said, if a dean of a medical school in the United States who interacts with hundreds of students knows so little about Islam, the 2nd largest faith in the world, we are in trouble. We are settling down in Long Island and we are doing this, doing that. And anyway, that was the seed that was planted. And then in 1992, we got a phone call from Rabbi Jerome Davidson from Great Neck. Are there any Muslims willing to talk? Of course, we ran there. And we're all involved with that. And we started American Muslims and Jews in Dialogue, 1992, before it was fashionable. And that led to a lot of presentations in different synagogues, churches, all over the place, at national meetings as well. And then 9/11 came, and of course, it had a huge impact on all of us. And we lost people in that, but we were blamed for it. And one of the folks at a university I was on the board said that he just heard Father Tom Hartman say, what I'm seeing on the television is not what the Muslims do. They're not the Muslims I know. So I made an appointment with Father Tom. I knew him well. And that was the beginning of a TV program on Telecare channel, Our Muslim Neighbors. We gave him the script, the speakers, and he and Rabbi Gelman from the God Squad hosted that program, which reached hundreds and thousands of particularly Catholics throughout. So that was my introduction. And then when we got this experience and knowledge and went to so many places, we said, why don't we give an organized structure to this? And we established the Interfaith Institute in 2015. And here's an invitation. Next month, on the 19th, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Interfaith Institute. And it has done pretty good work. We'll give a summary of what we have done there. And Arthur is a pillar. Presentations a couple of times a year really are focused, timely, and I don't have to tell you about Arthur, what a great guy he is. Ethical, and he poses those challenging questions. You're walking down the street and you pick up $100. What would you do with it? Would you try to find the person who lost it, or pocket it, or give it to the police? What would you do? What does your religion say? These are the kinds of questions he provokes some answers from the community. So that was the Interfaith Institute, and on October 19th, we have a nice gala event in Cotillion, not far from here. And any of you interested in joining us as our guests, just let us know. We'll be happy to welcome you there. Now, where was I? Okay, Interfaith journey is done. 2 delegations I was part of. Let me share those experiences with you. 2011, I was asked to come. I had a fairly high profile because of the Islamic Center to join a delegation going down to Mexico to see why are we getting so many people up here from Mexico. What's the reason? So I was part of about 8 or 10 members who went down there. We went to Oaxaca. Anybody from Oaxaca here? A state in Mexico. And we went to the small villages. I never get this image out of my head. Small village, small house, hut, and so on. You see the woman there, you see the child there, but there are no men. So the obvious question, what happened to the men? Well, they have gone north. They took the train and they decided to go north. Why did they go north? NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, allowed free distribution of whatever you produce in Canada, America, Mexico, and any 3 of the 3 countries. So why did that lead to this? A farmer in Iowa who has 100 acres and a tractor is producing corn. His cost is much lower than the small farmer in Oaxaca who has a mule and maybe an acre of land. So he couldn't compete. So the price of corn, which is a stable diet, fell in Mexico through this NAFTA, and it had a huge impact on the farmers in Oaxaca. And they had no other skills except to farm. They couldn't compete, they couldn't sell their product, so they decided to take a walk, go to America and see how they can support their family. The message is that what we do here has an impact globally. Now, the recent stuff, which with all the cuts that are going on, USAID cutoff has had a huge impact in global health. And there are stories about young women going for delivery, and they find that the place that they were expected to deliver is closed because it was supported by USAID. So the message is we're all interconnected. What happens someplace has an impact on us. The second delegation I was part of was an interesting experiment from a philanthropist in Long Island who wanted to take 9th graders from Catholic, Muslim, and Jewish backgrounds to the Holy Land. They didn't know each other. The first time they were meeting was at Kennedy Airport. And so they went, and what was the objective? To see what happens. It was an experiment. Take 16-year-old kids on a trip. So we selected 7 kids from the Islamic Center, and for lack of any other person, I was the chaperone. And so Rabbi Berman from Suffolk was part of it. and there were a bunch of teachers from Chaminade School. So we land at Tel Aviv airport. I have a nice setup there, and the 20+ people breezed through. And remember, this was a state-sponsored visit. It was not a surprise. We had our papers submitted, background submitted, so on and so forth. And as my turn came in, they said, please go to the other room. That other room was my residence for the next 5-6 hours. I was stripped. The only thing that wasn't done was a cavity search. Everything about me, who, where, what, cross-checking, blah, blah, blah. Then they bring in Colonel Sosa. He's the head of security of the whole airport. And he went through the whole thing. And luckily, I had this book with me, The Story of a Mosque in America. In this, the 6th chapter deals with Amjad, American Muslims and Jews in Dialogue. I told him, look, we have a delegation, there are people out there, I'm one of the chaperones, what's your problem? He finally understood when he looked at my professional background and so on. So as we were departing, I said, Colonel Sosa, what was this all about? These people are waiting for me outside, there's television waiting for me. He said, we had intelligence that you're a big fish. You came here to support Hamas. I said, what is Hamas? Never heard of them. Hamas had just won the election in Gaza, and they were forming their political, and according to Colonel Sosa, I had brought a bundle of money for them. So that was my introduction to Hamas, and now today, you turn on the TV, not a day goes by when you don't hear that word. So that was my introduction. What I saw in his Holy Land was very disturbing. Separate roads, separate license plates, separate color water towers for the two communities. And one side you'll see beautiful garden, swimming pool, on the other side across the street, barren. So clear discrimination all over the place. And so that was, the kids, by the way, got along swell. The kids had a great time. We came back and they were interviewed on TV, on telecare, and so on. So that was my introduction about Holy Land. One thing I forgot, I also was, as I said, with all difficulties, there is relief. I was invited to the White House in September 2000. Yeah, September 14, 2000. This was a post 9/11 evaluation, and not post 9/11, I'm sorry. This was basically an invitation extended to some 200 people around the country, and I was one of them, I don't know why. And President Clinton addressed us. He wanted support for 3 bills which were in Congress. One was that he wanted to provide free meal to any kid in the world who went to school, free lunch. And his reasoning, if I can feed them a meal, they won't go hungry, they may learn something, and they'll stay out of trouble. Makes sense? And then a big chunk of money for AIDS, which was rampant at that time, tuberculosis and malaria, particularly focused on Africa. And there was something third, which I have forgotten what he was. But in his address to us, this is what he said, and I'm paraphrasing what he said. We live here in the United States as 5% of the world's population, but we consume 30% of the resources. It is in our interest to support the have-nots, meaning other countries. We can't live in a castle, be surrounded by slums. It's just a question of time before the slum dwellers throw stones at us. I mean, that was a projection in 2000. And again, the message is clear. We can't just hoard and look inside. We have to look outside and reach out if we want peace. So coming to the end of my presentation, basically, almost on time. As ethical humanists, you already live with this truth. I don't have to tell you this. You affirm the worth of every person. You believe in reason, compassion, and community. You reject cynicism and nihilism. Your philosophy is not passive. It is active, engaged, and hopeful. It insists that meaning is made through ethical living, even in the face of suffering. And hope as a resistance, you have demonstrated. I've watched many public demonstrations where many members of the ethical society are demonstrating against what's going on now. To hope is to say, I will not be numbed. To hope is to say, I will not abandon others. To hope is to say, I believe in the possibility of change. This is not easy, it requires courage, but it is also contagious. Hope spreads through stories, through solidarity, through shared purpose. And what's the call to action? What do? You listen deeply to those who suffer. Let their stories shape our conscience. I'm sure you have seen on television what's going on in Gaza. I just can't put my arms around it, how that's possible in modern day. And speak the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Somebody speaks the truth, they get thrown off television. They don't have a show anymore. Build bridges across divides. Support the movements that align with human dignity, and above all, stay present in our communities, in our relationships, and in our ethical commitments. Hope is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is what allows us to face the world as it is and still believe in what it could be. It helps to have a mindset focused on opportunities, imagines options and small joys, holds outcomes slightly with curiosity, which fuels motivation and resilience and restores energy and commitment. We've all seen optimistic people and pessimistic people. For this one, there's nothing right. For this one, everything is fine, thank God. Let us be carriers of hope, not because we are certain of success, but because we are committed to meaning and justice. We are interconnected. The NAFTA deal had a huge impact on illegal migration to USA. The recent USAID kites have devastated the global health landscape. A recent case story was brought to my attention. Carmi, 31, in labor, her water had broken, and she arrives at a facility only to find that no staff are available to provide the care in the small village in India. Think about it, imagine. Then her husband has to drive her to a bullock cart 20, 30 miles so that she can deliver safely. The global conflicts and our role in it, Kashmir, Bosnia, Gaza, leads to human suffering, and we need to get involved. And finally, let me close with a quote by Robert Reich, who I watch on YouTube all the time. Boycotts are taking hold, federal courts are hitting back, the Trump, Vance, Musk regime's popularity is plunging, and the Doge efficiency is losing credibility. In these dark times, people are starting to fight back, and I'm hopeful that we will be able to turn the tide. And in our tradition, we would say, Inshallah, God willing, and thank you for your attention, and no applause.
It's also our tradition that we take 5 minutes after the speaker for anybody here who has a question, not a comment, but a question for our speaker, Dr. Faroque, for clarification or for him to expand on something that he said. Yeah, go ahead. Right here.
I am unschooled in any religion, but I find admirable qualities in the three religions that we're talking about here. And I wonder what you think is the cause for the animosity and hatred among people, and how you believe that can change, and what technique, what aspect of it you think can
5
help.
minutes.
How about 5 years?
5. I grew up as a kid in Kashmir. We had every faith except the Jewish community there. Every faith was represented, and we went to school together. We ate together. We went to each other's houses of worship. And I was very familiar when I landed here about the different faiths. There was peace. There was peace around. Now, I hate to say this, but a lot of this has to go back to the colonization, and which created the Kashmir problem, the Palestine problem, and who knows, God knows, Ireland problem. And the big powers have their own, say and do what they want to do, and that affects all. Once you impact people at the grassroots level, then who did it? They watch. In Kashmir now, you won't find any person who is in favor of an Indian. Why? Because of what they have done to the Kashmiris for the last 40, 50 years, demographically and in positions and so on, discrimination basically. So, and you go back to the Crusades, and the Pope basically initiated the Crusades. Let's go to the Middle East and destroy whoever comes in the way. That led to a lot of animosity. And now then came some kingdoms where there was freedom, justice. In Spain, Andalusia, as I've heard Abba Ibn speak, the two golden periods for the Jews were in Andalusia under Muslim rule and United States. And so what was different? Different was justice. If you treat people with justice, with equality, with respect, the religion disappears from the equation. So that's my humble take on it. It's certainly not an answer to all these complicated, deep questions.
Ashley.
Hello. Hi there. You have an extremely impressive...
Happy birthday.
Thank you. You have a very impressive background. I feel like in my life, the theme I've seen over and over is that there are so many spaces where big change is really hard to do, coming from an individual, right? Those messages that you had expressed that Clinton had told you about when you had met him, that was the day after I was born, and those sentiments are still true. You have made so much progress in spaces that I think of as typically very hard to move. Medical spaces where there's committees of people trying to stop new wings being developed because the budget is critically decided by so many people, right? These faith spaces that have long institutions and traditions. How do you feel, in the spirit of hope, you were able to really amplify your individual voice? What are your tips for making the beliefs that you have bigger than yourself?
Demonstrate results. When I was appointed chair of medicine, the department was in shambles. We changed the recruiting methods. We brought in new staff. The deadbeats were asked to leave. And pretty soon we started seeing results in objective, measurable parameters. And that ended up with my dismissal. So look, the bureaucracy came in the way. So my answer would be, don't give up, stick to your guns. If you have something to prove, demonstrate excellence, and eventually people will come around, and the successful institutions do that. The ones that are, why is Nassau County always in the news? Because every time a new government comes in, they change the leadership. I was there for 12 years. I had I was there for 12 years. I had 7 CEOs. And in my view, one of them was qualified to be a CEO. Because they were all political appointees. You come in, fill the slot, and you get a few votes, and that translates all the way down to the bottom of the system. So yeah, from the top, you have to demonstrate your worth, your excellence, and the results follow.
Okay.
One more.
Not a comment, but a question, please. Yeah.
So, Dr. Khan, you alluded to you were raised in an environment in Kashmir where people went to each other's homes and there was unity, and religion took a space in the background. And I agree with that because it's the silos that we create. When I don't know my neighbor, I don't know who this person is. I'm not in touch with their humanity, but I'm in touch with what is represented in the media, et cetera, as what they represent. So my question to you is, how do we break those silos that keep us from seeing the humanity in each other and keep us so separate from each other as the other?
That's what established Interfaith Institute of Long Island. You have on the board members from all different backgrounds who set the agenda and who set and in the process you get to know each other. I visited Brahma Kumaris, I'd never been there before. And I learned what they believe in, and I have great respect. I've visited so many gurdwaras, and how many of us know that you can walk into any gurdwara, have a free meal in any part of the world, on any day. And so these are the kinds of things you learn when you visit other places, bring them in, have an open discussion, open conversation. There'll be differences, of course, on theology and so on and so forth. But how do you break silos is developing constructive mechanisms of interacting. It's very hard to knock on somebody's door, I want to come and discuss with you. But if you have an organization, this is a good example. Look at how many faiths are here and no faiths are here. This is a good example. So deed before creed, behind me. That's the motto. Do something and you'll see the results. We used to, in Kashmir, we used to have, it was like a dreamland. On the Pandits' big holiday, they would come with gifts. We would go to their houses with gifts, attend each other's weddings and so on. But now that's all broken down because of the conflict.
Okay. Is there anybody on Zoom I can't see? No. Oh, right. Thank you. If you can stay around afterwards where people may want to have a conversation.
Sure.
That's fine. If you need to go, we understand.
Remember, I'm retired, no problem.
Very good.